Hello and welcome back to the NUFC Opinion Blog for the first fan feature of the new series. Today I'm joined by Chris Currie from True Faith Writers. Chris, how you doing?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm absolutely fine. Thank you very much for joining me. So, Chris, I asked this to all my guests at this point, sort of a big open question to start with. How did your love for Newcastle United begin?
I do often ask myself that question every weekend as well, mate. When I'm crying at the results. Yeah, it's an interesting one. But we've had a chat about this before. So I was born in Scotland originally. So my whole family are Glaswegians, half Rangers, half Celtic. My dad being the Celtic side. I know. There's a sore point there. But I was moved down here very young age. I was 2 years old. So in terms of my football team, it was more my friends that kind of dictated what was going on there. So by the time I was old enough to start kicking the ball and understanding football, there was a mixed bag of some of them were Liverpool fans because their dads were Liverpool fans from the 70s and 80s. And then the Manchester United glory supporting streak started to appear a little bit when, they started to win things. And obviously my core friends, thankfully, were all Newcastle mad. So yeah, they kind of
They've got some sense. Then. They've got some
they did. Well, I don't know if that's questionable. They've got any sense, mind you, but
sense maybe not the right word, but they've got.
Yeah, they hooked me in, mate. They hooked me in. That was me from there. So
no, good. And so obviously you've been supporting for many years now. So what would, if you had to pick one or two best memories of supporting the club, what would you go with?
An interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I've been very lucky to enjoy the better days at Newcastle United as opposed to, the current shower of shite that you've unfortunately been served up, mate, for most of your time supporting the club. But obviously one of the key bits that comes out, obviously the away 5-0 beating Manchester United 5-0. When we'd lost the league to them the season before, just that team, the way they played. Shearer getting loads of stick from the Man U fans and then scoring and then setting up Ferdinand's header. And, just that team in general was just fantastic. But to watch that game and to see that side, week in, week out, really was really impressive.
Yes, no, I can imagine. And so any players who stand out? Obviously, you could pick players from the Entertainers era or the Bobby Robson era. So do you have any players that stand out for you as some of your favourites?
It's weird actually because I played as a defensive midfielder who liked to stick a tackle or two on people and spread the ball around if I could. So weirdly enough, it's really unglamorous. But my favourite player that year was David Batty, which a lot of people kind of raise an eyebrow when I tell them. But I just loved the way he played. He was hard as nails. I mean, he never shirked the tackle. I remember, I think it was a game against, was it Mets or something, when somebody punched him in the eye and he had blood coming from his eye and he was still getting stuck in and challenging for the ball. And I just loved the way that he played, and he was actually a lot better on the ball than people give him credit for. So I kind of, as a young guy, modelled my game a little bit on Batty, which wasn't very glamorous, but it was enjoyable to watch him play. And I think we could do with a play like that these days, mate, couldn't we?
Oh gosh, yeah, we'd love it. Speaking of these days, the season hasn't exactly started brilliantly, has it?
Understatement.
Obviously, we go to Manchester United this weekend at the time of recording. What are your thoughts on that?
God, my thoughts on that. I'm just trying to remember if a team's ever been beat 10-0 in the league. I can't quite remember actually if anyone's got above the 9.
Oh, so, we love the optimism, don't we?
We do, mate. Yeah, I mean, obviously the season's been a dreadful start, really. But we've documented it, well, obviously on your blog, mate, as well as what we do for True Faith. When you lack ambition and you consistently neglect the club like this regime has done and is doing, you can't expect anything other than what we're getting served up. But the biggest worry, I think, for me going into a game like Manchester United is we all know how far apart we are from that top 4-6, kind of echelon of the league. But watching Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool to an extent, we're so far away. We might as well be in a different league or even 2 leagues below. And I just think that whether the main man plays or not, which is obviously the circus side story, whether he plays or not is irrelevant. I just think that we're going to get absolutely roasted by a very, very good Manchester United side, and I just can't see anything but a defeat and a really bad one as well, Dan.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? Gone are the days of away 5-0, unfortunately.
Oh God, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And so looking ahead to the rest of the season, obviously, I know we haven't started well, but how do you see it going? Do you see us drop it? I know obviously it's early days still, but that R word relegation still gets brought up. So is that the way you see it going, or do you think we'll survive by the skin of our teeth once again.
It's funny, mate, because I mean, we spoke before. I try to be more of a pragmatist than than kind of a doom and gloom merchant. But you look at, like I said there, the squad we've got. Actually, the squad we've got. In all fairness, I do think there's quality there. I think when you look at some of the players, you got your Sir Maximums, your Wilsons, your Miggies. Even Fraser. I know he's injured yet again. The defence. We've not got a bad team. I don't think we're any worse than your Brightons, your Wolves, your Southamptons down there. But the biggest problem that we have is the manager. He's clearly not getting enough out of those players to put in performances against teams that we should beat. And we've already played, arguably teams that we should do a lot better against. We had I think when the fixtures were drawn, we all thought, oh, that's not a bad start. That West Ham, Villa, Southampton. And you're hoping to get at least 2 or 4 points out of those games, really. But we've been beat comprehensively twice. I know West Ham are doing really well, but we haven't even gone anywhere near the bigger teams, and we've got Leeds up after Manchester United. I think they're capable of ripping us to shreds as well with that pace and their movement. If I'm honest, mate, I just think that unless something drastically changes in terms of the coaching of the side and actually playing players in the right positions, I think we're destined to go down, mate. Sadly.
Yeah, that obviously you mentioned the manager there. If you could sum Steve Bruce up in 3 words, what would you pick?
Bacon, custard. No, I'm only joking. Yeah, I would probably describe him as a footballing relic. Is probably the 3 words I would use to describe him. He's had a great career. He was a really good player. Going back to what we were talking about early 90s. Steve Bruce was the captain of Manchester United when they were winning leagues. He was a cracking centre half. Alongside Pallister. One of those players that everyone still talks about. How did he not get in the England squad? He was a good player. When he came out to be a manager, he went to likes of Birmingham and Palace and stuff like that. And once upon a time he might have been. I wouldn't say he was as good as Brendan Rodgers, but he was that kind of Brendan Rodgers type character of a young coach and everything else. But he keeps saying he's had 900 games. And I think the more he says it, the more I think it just kind of, it quantifies what I'm saying there. He's a footballing relic. He's been in this game way too long. If he was a player, his legs would have gone and you'd retire him out, and he would be replaced by a younger model. But when it comes to managers, I think they just hang on too long. And I think the game's passed him by. I think bringing in Jones last season was a way to actually help him adapt to the tactics that people were adopting against him. And I think that's the only reason we managed to pull out some results because we had some kind of an answer, to the opposing managers. And, these weren't Pep Guardiola's or Jurgen Klopp managers. These were, your Sean Dyche's, your Scott Parker's and stuff like that. And they were totally coaching the arse off Bruce. So I think without Jones coming in, he wouldn't have had that and we would have went down. So I think, either you loosen his influence on the side or you get rid of him straight away and you get a younger manager in who's got a bit more about. I wrote a piece for True Faith about this, that I hate this line that people use where they say, oh, well, who else is going to take it? This is who we've got. And I don't accept that he's the best that we can hope for as a manager. We're not going to get that wonderful man behind you, Rafa Benitez, as he's got elsewhere. And we're not going to get
Keegan. Everton manager has a post in my room, which I probably should take down now, shouldn't I?
Well, it should be. Stick Bruce's face over it. But no, we're not going to get a manager of that ilk again. We were so lucky then, timing and, everything else, and Rafa wanting to be back close to home and stuff like that. We're not going to get lucky like that again. So I think the next stage for us has got to be a Graham Potter type character, mate. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, that brings me neatly on to my next question, Chris, because I was going to ask if Steve Bruce was to go at any point this season, who is the type of person who you would like to bring or like to see come in?
Yeah, but it's interesting, as I've just been saying there, I think we need a younger, more progressive manager, stroke coach. I mean, I know we've got Graham Jones, but, I think a lot of guys have said, and Alex said it really well as well in the last podcast with Norman, that, for True Faith, that Jones has had a stint as a manager and it didn't go very well.
At Luton, didn't go well at all.
It didn't. I mean, if you look at someone like Steve McLaren's a good example. You talk to some of the best players that this country's ever produced. You David Beckham's, your Paul Scholes, your Nevilles, Michael Owens, Shearer's. He was a great coach, with the Cones and everything else, but terrible manager. And I think Jones potentially might be in a similar bracket, that he's a great coach, but not
Yeah.
a good manager. So in terms of, the guys that I'd like to see, and I think if you had a nice bit of synergy as well with Jones, Eddie Howe's obviously a massive name straight away. He's available right now. I think the longer Howe is out of the game, the less people remember him. So I think he's going to get to a stage where he has to do something, and it's weird with Howe and Frank Lampard, who's another guy that I would love to see come in. I think he works well with youth. He's worked well under, kind of tight budgets like he did at Derby County. And I think he was unfairly dealt with at Chelsea. But this just shows you the sad reality of where we are as Newcastle United right now. I think both those guys are maybe waiting to see what happens with Patrick Vieira. If he gets the bullet at Palace, that's a ready-made job for them to come in. So potentially that might be an issue. But there's also, Roberto Martinez as well. And I think all three of those managers, if they were given what they were promised, which is a big if.
A big ask.
It's a huge if under this regime. But I still think we're a huge club, and I still think we're a big draw for a manager. That if you can get it working here, if you can get it right here, and I hate to say stepping stone club because I hate being referred to as that, but if you can get it right at Newcastle United and get them, top 10, maybe get them to win a cup, you could probably write your own meal ticket to another job. Once you do that. And I think all those managers with the right kind of backing and promises, I think they would take a bite at it, but I just don't know if they get there, mate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, you mentioned the regime there. Now, the thing that has plagued us at Newcastle for the last, 18 months now is this takeover. Now, I hate to keep mentioning it because at the minute it just seems dead in the water. But do you think it will ever happen, this one, or do you think it's really is time to move on and just accept that it's not happening? Or do you think there's still things rumbling on in the background that we just don't know about?
It's a strange one. I think if I can answer it in two different ways, as supporters, I think we have to move on. I think there's far too much division within the fan group of believers and non-believers. It's almost like flat earthers.
I don't know who you must be referring to there.
Oh well, I won't drop any names, but it's created a real toxicity and animosity within a really wonderful fan base. I mean, we're from different eras of supporting the club, but there's always been that unity of being a Newcastle fan. When you're a young guy and you go to your first game and you walk in the pub with all these big burly blokes that look after you. Oh, come on, young man, get the ball. And that seems to be replaced with arguments of you don't believe the takeover's happening. You're a Mackham, get out. Yeah. And I just think that needs to stop. But the club have a responsibility to make that stop. That they could have stopped that by talking. Mind you, after reading the last statement, it's probably a good thing they didn't talk. But
we asked for communication after 14 years, and then that's what we get.
We got a letter written in crayon by somebody's 8-year-old daughter. But no, it's they could have came out and stopped that, and then that kind of moves into the other side of it, that if Mike Ashley wants to sell to this consortium because they're going to give him the biggest chunk of change going, and he's just written everybody else out, he needs to know that his case against the Premier League is so watertight that he will win it. Now, these are very important businessmen, Dan, that would never speak to the likes of us, and I'm sure they don't do these things lightly. I don't think the PIF would have dropped 15 or 17 million quid into a deal that they were never going to be able to get done. So there has to be questions asked about that. But I think in terms of Newcastle United, at the minute, we are just a zombie club. We're neither here nor there. We're in the middle. We're in a very competitive league where everybody's strengthened, everybody's improved their squads. Even in COVID, I know there's obviously the statement referred to the lack of money in COVID. I think we dropped something about 44 million off the revenue, I think it was. But other clubs have dropped similar amounts of money. They're still buying players, for 10, 12 million quid. And, it's Ashley has to make a decision here as to what he wants to do, because I think, and again, that goes into the manager situation as well. You're not going to buy a new squad. You're not going to drop 100 million quid, on a squad in the transfer window unless you're bought by somebody. You've got a squad to probably finish mid-table, but you've got a manager that's going to get you to finish bottom 3 right now. So he has a big decision to make as an owner as to what he wants to do. But takeover-wise, mate, I think as fans, ignore it, shut all the noise, concentrate on what's happening on the pitch. But as a club, they need to figure out what they're doing.
That's the thing, because the arbitration case is still yet to happen. Of course, it's now to happen. And the start of the new year. So we shall see what happens with that eventually. But yes, I agree with you completely. On-field matters must take precedence for us, at least out as fans. But to sum things up then, obviously, as we know and as we discussed, Newcastle United at the moment is a zombie club, as you describe it. But in the future, what would you like an ideal Newcastle United to look like?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because with the takeover, it's funny because I know a lot of Man City fans actually through my work, because I've traveled around a lot and I've met a few. I would call them proper City fans. They were at Gillingham away in the League One playoff final and stuff like that, and Sean Goater and all that stuff. So they've been there and then they've been here, and I think some of them, when you talk to them, don't like what Manchester City have become. They feel like they've lost that soul of the club, because they used to develop young players, bring them through the ranks, like so, your Joey Bartons and your Vassels and Sturridges and all these guys and everything else, Micah Richards, but when you've got that much money and you can buy the best players in the world, why not? But I would probably like to see, and you can appreciate this because you are old enough to remember this, the Bobby Robson era, which was a perfect blend of experienced, top quality players with youthful energy, and I would love to see a Newcastle United like that, where you've got a spine of a team, whether you've went out and bought them, and I'm talking top class centre forwards, midfielders, goalkeepers, centre halves. And in and around that, you've got a nice sprinkling of, I would personally love to see players come through the academy, and actually do something. For years I've watched on Liverpool, Manchester United with envy. You see a Steven Gerrard come through, or a Scholes, Michael Owen, Wayne Rooney at Everton, and we just don't develop those players, and that's a major problem. So a new look Newcastle United for me, yes, has to concentrate on the present and getting that playing squad better, but they have to look at the future, mate. They have to develop the young kids.
Yeah, no, that's a very good answer. Really well put.
Thank you, mate.
Yes, very good indeed. That does some things up though. So thank you all very much for watching. Thank you, Chris, for joining me. If you want to, actually, I did forget to mention at the start, it's not just True Faith that you write for, but you also have your own little blog on YouTube. So if you'd like to do a little plug.
Yeah, thank you, mate. I really appreciate
plug.
A little plug. Very well worked, mate. Very well. Yes, so obviously I'm involved with the Slide Rule Pass blog with my good friend Mark at Faz1981 on Twitter. So I'm a Newcastle fan, he's a Villa fan, but we look at the whole of football as a kind of a whole entity. And it's sometimes nice to disappear from your own club for 10, 20 minutes and talk about somebody else's. But yeah, so we're on YouTube, so check us out there. Obviously, we're on Twitter as well at SRP blog. And, I'm happy to have any new subscribers or anyone wants to just check us out for a little bit.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chris. Anyway, do really appreciate you coming on the channel, and that does wrap things up. So thank you all very much for watching. And how are the lads?
How are the lads? Thanks, mate. Cheers, Dan.